Hey guys, Miss Gillian here. So, getting back to our story, The Case of the Mummy Mystery, you guys listened to chapter 3 and chapter 4 last week. So, let's go back and talk about what has been happening in the story. So, first, we're going to start off with the characters. So, that we have Jigsaw, who's also known as Theodore, and he's the detective that all his friends keep going to, and he's the narrator of the story, which means he's the one telling the story. Then we have Mila, who is his best friend. We have Joey Piganato, who's the one who's going to be eating the worm. Bobby Slavusky, who is the one who asked him to eat the worm and dared him. Then we have Daniel and Nicholas, who are Jigsaw's brothers. And we get introduced to them in chapter 2 when they are sitting around the kitchen table with their parents. So Daniel and Nicholas tell Jigsaw that they're going to tell him about the mummy, but it has to be downstairs in the basement and after dinner. So they went down to the basement, and the oldest brother, Billy, who is a new character, is fixing an engine, as we see right here in the picture. And they start telling Jigsaw about the mummy. They tell him about how the mummy came up and how he terrorized the town and how he ate Mrs. Epstein's cat Twinkles. And they were telling that people have seen it happen. But Jigsaw's not so impressed. He doesn't really think that it's true, and he doesn't believe that people saw it with his own eyes. So then we get into chapter 4. And he goes and sees his friend Joey and Mila. And Joey's practicing by eating an ant because he's going to be eating the worm on Friday for Halloween. So he starts eating the ant. And he closes his eyes and he eats the ant, and he said that it's no big deal. I can do this. The ant tasted like nothing. So they start talking about Halloween, and Jigsaw's talking about what he wants to be. And he thought maybe a pirate or a gorilla or Frankenstein. And Mila's going to be a vampire. And as the story goes on, they talk about the mummy again. And now they're in class. And everyone in class says that the mummy is true. And especially a guy named Earl Bartholomew, who was an 8th grader that lived across the street from Ralphie. And Ralphie is in their classroom. So Ralphie says that it was Halloween night. Earl was in a hurry, so he cut through Greenlaw Cemetery. Suddenly, he felt someone push him in the back. Earl fell and chipped a tooth. But when he turned around, no one was there. So that's a creepy story that he said to Jigsaw, and Jigsaw still does not believe it. However, he put his detective face on and got to work, and he took out his detective journal and he wrote The Case of the Mummy Mystery. Then he said, this looks like a job for Jigsaw Jones, Private Eye. Okay, so now we're going to move on to chapter 5 and 6. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure you read it, listen with me, read along with me, and then answer the questions at the end. All right, hope you guys enjoy.
Chapter 5, Halloween Fever. Halloween was nearly here. Everybody in room 201 was ready to explode with excitement. Our teacher, Mrs. Gleason, said she was going to send the whole class to the nurse. You guys have a bad case of Halloween fever. We sure did. We were really looking forward to the Halloween parade. All the parents were going to come, even Graham's. And it was the same day that Joey Piganato was going to eat a worm. What more could you ask for? Meanwhile, the story of the Halloween mummy swept through the class like a hurricane. The more kids talked about it, the better the stories got. Now even Bobby Slufsky claimed that he had seen the mummy. I didn't know about that, but one thing was for sure. We were all going to stay far away from Greenlawn Cemetery. Miss Gleason was excited too, but she wasn't thinking about mummies. I really want to win the teacher's pumpkin pie contest this year, she told us. Ever since last year's disaster, I've been working extra hard in the kitchen. What happened last year? Danica Sterling asked. Miss Gleason buried her face in her hands. I left my pie on the radiator at school on the day of the contest. By the time the judge saw it, my beautiful pie was melting. You could have eaten it with a straw. Then Miss Gleason cheered up. But this is my year, she said. I'm going to make the most beautiful, most delicious pumpkin pie this school has ever seen, and I'm not going to leave it on the radiator. I don't like pumpkin pie, complained Athena Lorenzo. She squinched up her face. It tastes too pumpkin-y. Miss Gleason walked to the blackboard. Well, okay then. Everyone break into groups. We've got a lot of work to do. Miss Gleason was the best teacher in the school. She made learning fun. This week's theme was Halloween. All week long, every activity had something to do with Halloween, so we didn't even mind learning. On Monday, Miss Gleason draped a white sheet over the big stuffed chair for story hour. She drew 2 black eyes on the sheet. We all took turns sitting in the ghost's lap for story hour. Even better, we read spooky stories every day. On Tuesday, we played Halloween bingo with our vocabulary words. We did spider math on Wednesday. Every group got a spider's body with a different number on it. My group, Mila, Joey, Geetha Nur, and me, got number 17. Then we had to pick out the legs that added up to 17 and attach them to the body. I attached 9 plus 8 and 11 plus 6. Joey Picanato tried to attach 1 plus 7, but Mila wouldn't let him. In art, we made really cool Batmobiles. Meanwhile, I did a little work on Joey's case. First, I caught up with Bobby Slavusky in the cafeteria. He was sitting with Biggs Maloney, Lucy Hiller, and Eddie Becker. Joey told me about your dare, I said. Bobby slid his tongue across his teeth and made a sucking noise. Yeah? So what? He said. I'm supposed to make sure everything's fair and square, I told him. Joey doesn't want to get cheated. Cheated? By me? Bobby placed his hand on his chest. I never cheat anyone. Sure, Slavusky, I said. You're a regular Boy Scout. But just in case, why don't you let me hold on to the money? This way it won't get lost. Bobby shook his head. Oh, Theodore, he said. Bobby called me Theodore just to bug me. You can trust me. Sure I can, I replied. But I don't. I'll be watching you, Slavusky. You better not try any funny business. Chapter 6. Eddie's Big Idea. Eddie Becker pulled me aside after lunch. Hey, Jigsaw, he said, is Joey really going to eat a worm for $1? I shrugged. You know Joey. What do you think? Eddie smiled. I think he's crazy enough to do it. I nodded. Joey was definitely crazy enough to do it. But you're going about this the wrong way, Eddie said. He could make a lot more than $1 if you help me. How? I asked. Sell tickets, Eddie said. I bet you a lot of kids would pay $0.25 to watch him do it. I thought it over. Well, it's not something you see every day. Eddie offered to be in charge of selling tickets. But I want pay for my work, he said. I get half, Joey gets half. It was a deal. We shook hands right there. Now Joey would be able to pay the $1 he owed me. One more thing, I added. Tell Bobby that I'll bring the worm. Back in room 201, I found a note inside my desk. It was in code. Blue the witch, candy, purple mummy, and tall man green is like door monster red, going brown to trick treat orange, get black you. I knew the note was from Mila. She liked to test my brain power. This one was called a color code. The only words that really mattered were the ones that came right after colored words. So I circled all the color words. Then I underlined the words that were next in line. I looked up and saw Mila smiling at me. I grabbed my throat and made a choking sound. Then my head fell on the desk as if I suddenly dropped dead. At recess, Miss Gleason gave Mila and me permission to visit the school library. We wanted to learn more about mummies. We found a good book called Mummies, Mummies, and More Mummies. I was a good reader, but Mila was a fantastic reader. It didn't matter how many words were in the book or how squished together the words were. Mila could read just about anything. I looked over her shoulder while Mila flipped through the pages. She'd read a little bit, say, or boring, or yuck, and flip the page. When she said yuck, I always made her read it out loud. Here's the thing. Long ago in Egypt, they used to make mummies all the time. That's because the Egyptians didn't want the bodies to get all juicy. The Egyptians believed they would need their bodies later on in a place called the afterlife. The afterlife was their idea of heaven. It took 70 days to make a mummy. The grossest part was when they scooped out the brain. They did this by sticking a long spoon up the guy's nose. Sheesh! Then the embalmer, the guy who was in charge of making mummies, took out the dead guy's stomach and guts and stuff. Then they dried the body out with a special salt called natron and wrapped it up nice and tight like a birthday present. Presto! One mummy coming up! Ding! The bell rang. We had to get back to room 201. Oh well, at least now I understood why mummies were so grumpy. They've all got headaches.
Okay, so what is happening now in the story? And do you think the mummy is real and why?